A person said one time, he said, "That's a horrible way of dying." I said, "What is a good way? Could you tell me what a good way is to die?"
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at 20 disturbing interviews with serial killers before being executed.
Do you think you're a hero to those hate groups?
Well, that's what they tell me, you know.
For this list, we're analyzing the most bizarre and harrowing discussions with famous killers before they died or were supposed to be put to death. If they weren't actually executed, they could still be eligible as long as they were sentenced to be. Which of these unnerved you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Michael Bruce Ross. Over the course of 3 years in the early 1980s, Michael Bruce Ross claimed the lives of 8 girls and women in Connecticut and New York. Ross had endured a troubled childhood and began his vicious crime spree in his senior year of college.
I just felt like I was right on the edge and like it was just going to be, it wouldn't take much to push me over. And it was very frightening back then. I'm not like that now. I'm just such a lovable guy now.
After he was captured in 1984, Ross confessed to all 8 murders and was sentenced to death in Connecticut. In an interview given while awaiting execution, the roadside strangler, as he came to be known, casually recounted his heinous crimes.
It was 3:30 in the afternoon on a fairly well-driven road. She was walking along the side of the road, and I just stopped the car, got out of the car.
At one point, he even bragged about the strength with which he strangled his victims.
It was an insane strength or something, and because I got a kick out of it because the prosecutor, I knew, had no idea that was coming.
Ross was executed in 2005, the last person to face that penalty in the state of Connecticut.
For some of us, death is not a punishment.
Edward Wayne Edwards. Right from his childhood, Edward Wayne Edwards lived a life of crime, even once appearing on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list.
It was a female who identifies herself as April. She said, "I think my dad could be responsible for Tim and Kelly. I think he killed them." And she said his name is Edward Wayne Edwards.
Edwards began killing after being granted parole in 1967 and was responsible for at least 5 deaths.
There were some cigarettes in the bottom of the duffel bag. I said, "You go ahead and get them out."
Edwards lived as a free man for decades before being arrested in 2009 and sentenced to life imprisonment for his crimes.
I felt bad, but apparently not bad enough that I kept from doing it.
Seeking a quick punishment, Edwards sat for an interview with the Associated Press, during which he confessed to killing his foster son, Danny Boy Edwards, for a life insurance payout.
He was stealing from my children, and I'm very close to my family in that respect. And so I just let my mind, I'm not new to crime.
In 2011, Edwards was handed the death penalty for Danny's murder. However, he died of natural causes just 1 month later. Bobby Joe Long. For more than 3 decades, Bobby Joe Long sat on death row in Florida before he was executed in 2019. Long was not only a serial killer, with at least 10 victims to his name, he was also a serial predator, having assaulted more than 50 women in around 3 years.
As soon as I opened my eyes from being asleep, that's what I was thinking about. That didn't let up until I did it.
He was arrested in November 1984 after one of his victims, Lisa McVeigh, led the authorities to him. Long claims in this interview with Miami's WPLG that his compulsions were triggered by a motorcycle accident that left him with head injuries.
The first time I did it, I couldn't really believe I did it.
With a piercing stare and a creepy half smile, he talks about being an average Joe who just happened to go off the edge every once in a while.
Probably 99.9% of the time, I'm as normal as he is or anybody else is. But there's that 1% of the time.
Andrei Chikatilo.
He was in a large iron cage in the courtroom. The cage was to protect him from the rage of the parents of the victims.
One of the most infamous killers in Soviet history, Andrei Chikatilo terrorized the Rostov Oblast in Soviet Russia between 1978 and 1990. Chicatillo claimed to have taken the lives of 56 people and was convicted of 52 murders. Referred to as the Butcher of Rostov, Chicatillo was known for his erratic behavior in court, but appeared a lot more restrained in this interview he granted before his execution. He rambles on about his troubled childhood and growing up during the Great Famine of the early 1930s in Soviet Ukraine.
Никто никогда не ласкал никогда, потому что у нас как раз все мое детство пришло это на военные, на голодные годы, так что мы там только лишь бы пухлые ходили, лежали бы выжить, какая там была.
When asked about the afterlife, Chicatillo brushes it off and expresses his readiness for whatever comes next.
Все это я считаю, что все это меня не касается как-то, все это прошло мимо моего сознания, все это не задумываюсь. Вот о муках своих я.
Perhaps most disturbing was his past desire to become a dictator from as early as the 9th grade.
Всех их пикаю, всех их знал, всех. Еще с 9 класса, когда Сталин умер, я уже готов был принять от Сталина это все, это самое, наследство, быть генсеком этой партии, это все, мировое коммунистическое движение.
Danny Rowling. Like some of the other individuals on this list, Danny Rowling was the product of a sadistic upbringing. In his adulthood, Rowling became a serial killer, murdering 3 people in his hometown of Shreveport, Louisiana, and 5 others in the student community of Gainesville, Florida. In 2004, Rowling appeared in this episode of the Canadian true crime TV show Forensic Factor.
I let the evil in, and the evil just took over. And it was like when the sun would go down, I couldn't resist it.
Rowling seems to express some remorse for his crimes and concedes that he deserves to die. But his demeanor throughout the interview appears to be that of someone needing to be the center of attention.
When the morning would come up, it was just like I would hate myself. It was like my God, what have I become?
That comes as no surprise, as he previously admitted his desire to be a well-known criminal, like fellow serial killer Ted Bundy.
I don't even know how much longer I'm gonna be on this earth. But when I die, I hope I'm ready. I hope I die half as bravely as the people who perished at my hand.
Peter Curtin. In the early 20th century, Peter Curtin reigned terror on the German city of Dusseldorf, assaulting and killing at least 9 people. He was known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf due to his disturbing fascination with blood. After his arrest in May of 1930, Curtin was analyzed by psychiatrist Dr. Carl Berg over a series of interviews. The infamous killer claimed that although there was a sexual nature to his crimes, he was primarily motivated by the sight of blood. He also stated that the very act of attacking his victims brought him intense relief. Just before his execution by guillotine, Curtin asked his psychiatrist if he would be able to hear the sound of his own blood gushing out after his decapitation. Tommy Lynn Sells. California-born Tommy Lynn Sells claims to have committed over 70 murders. If true, that would make him one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history.
Every time I did it, it was that rush again, and I started chasing that high.
Despite his claims, Sells was convicted of only 1 murder and sentenced to die in September of 2000. In a jailhouse interview with Martin Bashir for ABC's Nightline, Sells described himself as an emotionless person, and that comes across quite clearly in the recorded clip.
When you look at me, you know what hate is. I don't know what love is.
With no remorse whatsoever, he recounted his killings, detailing the rush he got from taking innocent lives. It's a rare glimpse into the mind of a heartless killer, and one capable of sending chills down any spine.
Why would that happen?
I didn't want him to live through the pain I lived through.
Ángel Maturino Reséndiz. Dubbed the Railroad Killer, Ángel Maturino Reséndiz was known to illegally hop trains as he traveled across the U.S. He would then invade homes close to the railroads, rob them, and murder the occupants.
This offender, unlike a lot of others, spent an incredible amount of time in that house going through everything.
In total, authorities believe Reséndiz killed at least 15 people in this manner. His calm and reserved behavior throughout this interview with renowned journalist Jacqueline Cacho heavily contrasts the vicious nature of his crimes. Given entirely in Spanish, Reséndiz doesn't necessarily go into explicit detail about the murders in this interview. Instead, he seemingly alludes to the motivation behind them. Although he described himself as an eternal being who was incapable of dying, Reséndiz was executed by lethal injection on June 27, 2006. Earl Forest. Back in December 2002, a drug dispute between longtime friends Earl Forest and Harriet Smith resulted in the former murdering the latter in her home.
I asked her, all I wanted was a lawnmower. She said, Earl, I'll get you a lawnmower. I guess maybe I felt like I was being lied to.
Forest also killed another friend of theirs, Michael Wells, who was visiting Smith at the time, as well as a deputy sheriff during a police shootout afterwards.
Why'd you shoot him?
I don't know. She looked at me funny, I guess.
For his crimes, he was put to death by lethal injection on May 11th, 2016. The first season of the A&E docuseries The Killer Speaks features an interview with Forest, who is completely devoid of any remorse.
Did you feel bad?
I don't know what I felt.
Instead, he puts the responsibility of his actions on Smith for not fulfilling a promise she made him. Watching the clip, you'd think he was the victim of the crime.
I did something for her. She was supposed to do something for me. Why did she, have to put us both in that position?
Joseph Paul Franklin. Joseph Paul Franklin was a notorious serial killer and white supremacist who is believed to have been responsible for at least 20 murders.
I mean, I can't go back and think about the cases, individually. I have too much other problems, too much other things I have to focus on.
Franklin mostly targeted interracial couples, African Americans, and Jewish people in his attacks. He also famously shot adult magazine publisher Larry Flynt in March 1978. Although this interview Franklin granted to CNN before his 2013 execution provides little information about his depraved crimes, it gives some insight into his state of mind.
And what was your mission?
Well, to try to get a race war started.
At the time of the murders, he genuinely believed that he was doing the will of God.
As misguided as I was doing the will of God. I thought I was actually doing right. This is what God wanted me to do.
While his mindset about that may have changed, Franklin still seems to relish in the fact that he is viewed as a hero by certain extremist groups.
Do you think you're a hero to those hate groups?
Well, that's what they tell me,
Gary Ray Bowles. Also featured on the A&E docuseries The Killer Speaks was Gary Ray Bowles. Bowles' victims were largely gay men who lived along the Interstate 95 highway, earning him the nickname I-95 Killer.
Why'd you take him out to that golf course?
Well, I just got a bad vibe from the guy.
In this taped interview for the TV show, Bowles seems to revel in the memories of his crimes as he recounts them. Not only is he amused when he recalls stealing a man's identity to evade capture, he also refers to one of his victims as, quote, crazy and creepy.
There's not really a way to describe it, it's just, I guess, relief.
Throughout the interview, Bowles tries to justify the murders, claiming that his victims had done specific things that seemingly triggered him to kill.
So I put one of the videos in. What came on the screen, it shocked me.
The apparent lack of accountability he shows only makes this much more uncomfortable to watch.
I took the birth certificate and social security card. I took it down to the DMV and I told them I lost my driver's license, and I basically became Timothy Ronald Whitfield.
Billy Wayne Coble.
Who is not going to leave this world? Aren't we all?
Described by one prosecutor as having, quote, a heart full of scorpions, Billy Wayne Coble killed his estranged wife's parents and brother. Coble remained on death row in Texas for nearly 30 years before he was executed by lethal injection in February of 2019. In the days leading up to his capital punishment, Coble sat down with Susanna Reed for his final interview.
To you, it matters. To some people, it matters. To me, it really no longer matters.
Without going into much detail about his crimes, Reed asks Coble if he regrets committing them. Coble cunningly evades the question and would only admit that he was behind the murders.
I've already said that I regret what happened. Now, I truly regret what happened. But I also truly regret what happened to a lot of things in life.
He repeats this trend, even when he's asked if he loved his former wife. This evasive behavior is just one more unsettling thing about this seemingly disturbed individual.
Did you love her, though?
I met my Karen when she was about 16, 17 years old.
Oscar Ray Bolin. In the mid-1980s, Oscar Ray Bolin killed 3 women throughout the Tampa area. Following his arrest, Bolin's cousin testified against him and implicated him in a 4th homicide. He received 3 death sentences and was executed on January 7, 2016 at the age of 53. One day before his death, Bolin was interviewed by Tampa's Fox 13.
How are you feeling this morning?
A little numb. I mean, I don't know how you would expect someone to feel. I mean, if they told you tomorrow you're dying, how would you feel?
Bolin appears calm and courteous throughout the interview, even expressing fear and worry about his upcoming execution. He also professes his innocence, something he continuously maintained throughout his imprisonment.
So you're saying you didn't murder these women?
No.
You didn't murder Natalie Hawley?
No.
Stephanie Collins?
No.
Terry Lynn Matthews?
No. I didn't know. I'd never seen them, never met them.
Bolin looks and sounds like a nice enough guy, which only makes the darkness underneath seem that much more sinister.
After 28 years of this, it's been in this box for 28 years. It's a release. My punishment's over. They can't hurt me no more.
Richard Ramirez.
As far as Satan is concerned, I believe in a malevolent being. His description eludes me, but I have felt powers that are evil.
A notorious serial killer known as the Night Stalker, Ramirez terrorized California with his violent burglaries, assaults, and killings. Ramirez took the lives of at least 15 people and was convicted of 13 homicides, leading to 19 separate death sentences. In 1993, Inside Edition aired an interview with Ramirez, who was then awaiting execution on death row.
They are desires, whereas if I didn't give in to them, I would be crushed by them.
Among other discussion points, he explained his theories on the psychological development of serial killers like himself. Even more chilling, when asked why he killed his victims, Ramirez hides a smile and simply says,
No comments, no comments. I cannot answer that at this time.
Ramirez was still awaiting execution in 2013 when he died of cancer. Carol Cole. A very prolific serial killer, Carol Cole claimed at least 16 victims throughout his life, although he confessed to killing 35. He was originally sentenced to life in prison in Texas, but was given the death penalty following his extradition to Nevada. 3 days before his execution, Cole granted an interview to Las Vegas's KLAS-TV. While smoking a cigarette, Cole shows complete indifference for his own life, but expresses remorse for his crimes.
Why not fight for your life?
I just don't care to.
Are you sorry?
For the victim?
Yes.
Yes.
In the end, he even claims that he deserves to die for what he did.
Well, it's the ultimate question. It is the question.
For what I did, yes, I think I deserve to die.
Cole is very quiet and reserved, and aside from some brief flashes, doesn't show much emotion. It makes the interview all the more disturbing.
And condemn myself for many years, because I can just imagine what her life might have been like.
Wesley Allen Dodd. On January 5th, 1993, Wesley Allen Dodd was executed by hanging, making him the first American criminal to be legally hanged in nearly 30 years. Between September and November of 1989, Dodd assaulted and killed 3, leading to his moniker the Vancouver Child Killer. Dodd's final interview is absolutely bone-chilling. With complete confidence, Dodd states that he would kill again if set free, and that he, quote, liked what he did.
I've done it before, and at the time I liked it.
He also claims that his execution would make a great example for future criminals. Throughout his interview, Dodd proves that he was fully self-aware, and a self-aware killer is a very scary thing.
Do you look forward to dying?
In a way, yeah. I think it'd be a relief. I don't have to think about all these things anymore. And I know that's the only way I can guarantee I'm not going to hurt anybody else.
Velma Barfield. The first woman to be lethally injected, Velma Barfield killed 6 people between 1969 and 1978. She was convicted for just 1 homicide, that of her boyfriend, Roland Stewart Taylor. However, it was enough to ensure a death sentence, and Barfield was executed on November 2, 1984. Her interview with Raleigh's WBTV shows a woman in pain rather than one who causes it. She seemingly attempts to garner sympathy by speaking about her isolation in prison and her years-long battle with drugs.
The last 10 years was just like that. Years of a drug nightmare.
She also credits God for getting her through the trials and tribulations of prison life.
Living in prison every day is a struggle, even at its best. And I know that without him and his strength that has sustained me, I couldn't have made it even thus far.
While Barfield apologizes for her crimes, most of the interview is about her, and it may rub many viewers the wrong way.
Today, if it were possible, I wish that I could take every bit of hurt on myself.
John Wayne Gacy. Known widely as the Killer Clown, John Wayne Gacy claimed at least 33 lives inside his suburban Chicago home. At the time, Gacy set an American record for the most homicide convictions. In 1992, he spoke with Walter Jacobson of CBS 2 Chicago as part of a television event. In a rather shocking and unnerving turn of events, Gacy played innocent.
If they want to be convinced or brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
He even claimed that he took a, quote, truth serum, and that proved his innocence.
I've taken 3.5 hours of truth serum. And under sodium amytal, the maximum amount that I could have, it shows that I have no knowledge of the crime whatsoever.
Like Barfield, Gacy also plays the sympathy card, portraying himself as a loving family man.
I've always looked after my children, even now.
Yet sometimes the veneer slips, and Jacobson is quick to notice the scheming man underneath. It's all quite eerie and probably not at all what viewers were expecting. Ted Bundy. On January 23, 1989, Ted Bundy, perhaps the most notorious serial killer in American history, was visited by a psychologist named James Dobson, and it showcases his well-publicized powers of manipulation. Bundy appears clean and well-dressed, offering a friendly next-door neighbor vibe.
What's going through my mind right now is to use the minutes and hours that I have left as fruitfully as possible and see what happens.
He's charismatic, charming, and well-spoken. Not at all what one would expect from a serial killer. Finally, he latches on to Dobson's evangelical beliefs, blaming both the adult film industry and violence in the media for his crimes.
This kind of literature contributed and helped mold and shape the kinds of violent behavior.
It fueled your fantasies, didn't it?
Well, in the beginning, it fuels this kind of thought process.
Biographers and historians argue that this is a prime example of classic Bundy subterfuge. Knowing that, the footage comes across as deeply ominous and foreboding. The term psychopath is often bandied around too often, but in this case, many agree that the term fits.
I couldn't control it anymore, that these barriers that I had learned as a child, that had been instilled in me, were not enough to hold me back with respect to seeking out and harming somebody.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Eileen Warnos. The final interview with Eileen Warnos is the complete antithesis of Ted Bundy's. Warnos shot and killed 7 men in a span of 1 year, and while she claimed self-defense, she was found guilty of 6 homicides and sentenced to death. Warnos' final interview is deeply troubling.
But you're okay now.
I'm okay. I'm okay. God is going to be there. Jesus Christ is going to be there. All the angels and everything.
She often widens her eyes and yells in a confrontational tone, and even verbally attacks the interviewer Nick Broomfield. She makes bizarre claims like getting tortured by, quote, sonic pressure.
And they were using sonic pressure on my head since 1997.
Sonic pressure?
And every time I was trying to write something, I think they had some kind of eye in the cell, I'm not sure, but every time I started writing something, it went up higher. So I'm thinking that probably had the TV rigged.
She states that dying will be like Star Trek, and that she'll go on to colonize another planet.
I think it's going to be more like Star Trek, beaming me up into a space vehicle, man. Then I move on, recolonize to another planet or whatever. But it's whatever's beyond. I know it's going to be good because I didn't do anything as wrong as they said.
Warnos' violent past, her abrasive behavior, and her mental state all combine to create some truly uncomfortable viewing.